Oh, hey guys. Yeah. I guess this will be our first installment of Rock and Roll. As you see, I'm in my robe. So I guess that means I need to talk about some rock and roll. I'm your host, Hugh Hefner here. Uh, really wanted to get on here on YouTube and just talk about just that, rock and roll. I love rock music. Um, Big Kiss fan, huge Kiss fan. I like Foo Fighters, Van Halen, and stuff like that. I mean, Deftones is probably one of my favorite current bands, if that tells you my music snobbishness. They're probably one of the newer bands that I like. However, in the last couple of years, I've been really heavily immersed in Black Sabbath. About a year or so ago, I went through and I was like, I have every Ozzy CD that he ever put out, as far as studio albums go, and I was like, I need to venture into the Black Sabbath realm. I'd had a couple albums, but didn't have them all. And me, I'm a collector. I have every Kiss album on disc, on vinyl, on cassette. Hell, I even have a couple A tracks laying around. Anyway, so after sitting a year listening to Ozzy stuff with Sabbath, I decided, okay, I'm going to venture into the DIO realm. So the first one I went and bought was this album here, Heaven and Hell. It's one of the premier best albums that Black Sabbath ever put out. It's their Rebirth, man. When Ozzy left, I think, the band probably thought, what are we going to do? Because, they built this huge success on a lot of major influential albums since the late 60s. You're talking Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Volume 4, Master of Reality, Sabotage. All of them were great. I'm kind of a purist. I think that, if you like an artist, you pretty much like everything they do. Here or there's songs that are not as good as some of the bigger hits. But I love Ozzy's Sabbath, and to some people, you'll hear them say like, you can only trust the first 6 Sabbath albums, and to me, I don't think that's true. Or that there's only one Black Sabbath, and that is the real Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward. However, Tony Iommi kept that band rolling on through the 80s and 90s. Different people stepped in to play different roles, as far as production, as far as singers, and drummers, and even bassists. Eventually Geezer left. But initially, Ozzy's drug habit got the best of him. And after they put this album out, Never Say Die, I think it was just kind of the death knell. They really only had one hit. What is it? Hard Road. Yeah, A Hard Road. And I think their ability to create new songs, write together, and collaborate just didn't pan anymore. They were all using a lot of drugs and they're using chemicals, and I heard stories. I've seen many documentaries talking about how Ozzy would lock himself in rooms for days and he would run off and stuff. So writing was probably hard, and once you reach the pinnacles of fame, the success kind of gets to you and makes you someone else, someone not, as Ozzy says, not just that normal person. He's John from the UK. He's just the dude from down the street, not Ozzy. But of course, I think even today with Ozzy's newest release, 2019, Ordinary Man, he tackles that like, he's never really been able to get away. I think he even tried to retire in the early 90s, which I guess we'll get back to that shortly, as we discuss DIO and Sabbath. drinking water, gotta stay hydrated, you know. So anyway, first thing I want to get into is Heaven and Hell. The production value on this album is amazing. The hits, I mean, you had Neon Nights, you had, shit, dude. I mean, you had everything. Lady Evil, Die Young, which I know Neon Nights and Die Young were the two big hits off that album, but typically, you know, like on Live Evil, which is also a great album, where they covered some early Ozzy stuff. That's the song they did. They did Neon Nights, but they did not do Die Young. They did Heaven and Hell because it's their title track. And later, when DIO came back into the fold after many singers, actually became the name of the group because of some issues with Ozzy and production and producers and managers and all those people, you know, the fun people that make you sign pieces of paper and sign your life away. But yeah, this album is killer. I read where Tony Iommi actually met with Ronnie James Dio at the I think the Rainbow Bar and Grill on the Strip in LA to discuss him becoming the next lead singer of Sabbath. They also later went into the studio and created some tracks on tape, and before they even had an album out, tested the waters, went in there and played some songs, and just to see the reception, like, you know, how people liked it, if people were dancing to it and stuff, whatnot. And it went over well. And then of course the tour for that album did well as well. That sounds great, doesn't it? Anyway, the thing is though, you know, coming off of Ozzy leaving, there were some structural differences and some creative differences in the band, and from what I understand, Ronnie James Dio was kind of a hard guy to work with. That was something that a lot of different people had worked with him had said, different interviews and stuff like that I had come across on either YouTube or you know, reading the liner notes to albums or whatever things I'd seen, you know. Because when I grew up, I watched a lot of VH1 Behind the Music. Very interested in that. I really like history, and you know, I guess in some senses I'm a rock historian to some degree, just because of my knowledge of the bands that I follow, such as Black Sabbath. So what happened is Bill Ward actually left the band too. He left on that Heaven and Hell tour and entered Vinny Appice, the younger brother of Carmen Appice. He had been in other bands and done things in the 70s, and they kind of crossed paths, him and Dio, and I think even probably Omi too. So that went on to form what people know as that era of Sabbath, or the Heaven and Hell band. After they put out that, they put out Mob Rules. Personally, I like Mob Rules. It's not as big to me as Heaven and Hell. It's just as good. Honestly, I don't think Dio does a bad job of singing or producing albums that are amazing and that have, you know, total rockness, great writing, all that. Same with Iommi, you know, and Geezer too. Geezer wrote a lot of songs with Sabbath during the Ozzy years. I think that's part of the reason why there was a lot of dysfunction and so many lineup changes with Sabbath, is that the dynamic had changed. You know, when Ozzy left, they had a thing going, and, you know, entered Ronnie James Dio, one of the best rock singers there is, one of the best frontmen, and he's also a really good writer. So therefore, he wants to be in the forefront of the production process and the writing process and the goings on in the studio. So, things changed. And I think when they put out Live Evil, they were saying that it was kind of like two older members of Sabbath and then, you know, the two new guys, Ronnie James Dio and Vinny Appice, they kind of they were in like one car after shows and after gigs and things, and then Geezer and Naomi were over here doing their thing. Of course, people were probably still abusing drugs on the reg. Things just fell apart. They weren't seeing eye to eye. They were talking about how whenever they were putting together Live Evil in the studio, they were doing all the, overdubs of stuff and, production and engineering, all that crap, that they would sneak in and do stuff behind each other's back. And I think it just created a huge rift. But, you gotta stay hydrated. So, that pretty much wrapped up Sabbath for that era. This great comeback era, this rebirth of something that I think a lot of people thought was just over, because Ozzy had started his solo career, and he had Randy Rhoads, he had these great albums coming out, and there's really no looking back for Ozzy. Ozzy was still dealing with his demons, but Lord, he had a thing going, and so did Sabbath. Black Sabbath with Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Live Evil, hell. Just to hear those covers of Ronnie James Dio doing original Sabbath era, like Ozzy Sabbath era songs. Hell, he even fucking covers Iron Man, dude. Like, that's a lot. Because Ozzy mentions himself by name in that song. So to hear him kind of smooth over that and make it his own. He was a great frontman. It's sad that he's gone from us, because he did so much with Sabbath and those guys that I think forever changed rock history. All right. Yeah. So that's pretty much Dio with Sabbath. However, he does make a comeback later. We'll get to that soon. As far as Sabbath is concerned, of course, we know what happened to Ronnie James Dio after those couple of albums. He formed Dio. But Sabbath kept going. They replaced him with Ian Gillan of Deep Purple. Now, Deep Purple, Rainbow, Ronnie James Dio's old band, and Sabbath, they all toured together or around each other, crossed paths, however, back in the day. So, I guess it was just kind of one of those things. You pick somebody somebody with vocal talent, somebody who can write, hold their own. I read, and I actually saw in a documentary I watched not too long ago, where Tony Iommi said that when Ian stepped in as the singer, they had not even really rehearsed. They just kind of went into the studio. They rented this place, and I think Ian stayed in a damn tent outside. He told Tony, "I'm going to stay in a tent," and he did. As far as Sabbath at this time, they had already lost Ozzy. Now they lost Dio and Vinny Appice and their original drummer Bill Ward. They were in between a rock and a hard place. They were in a hard spot as far as like just trying to keep the wheels moving and the gas tank full. That doesn't mean I don't think that their direction was any less important, or the music was terrible by any means. I think some people, the critics probably thought it was terrible, but actually that album that I just had in front of my face, Born Again, I think it charted the highest it had, Sabbath had charted since Ozzy was in the band. Sabotage, I think maybe it was Master of Reality, which Master of Reality was a huge album. So really, for that to chart like it did after having Ronnie James Dio in your band, kind of probably put a little bit more wind in their sails. Bill Ward came back to record this album. However, by the end of it, when they decided to tour, I think Beef Bevan from ELO took over. And that's when it kind of got a little bit Spinal Tappy. And there's a video out there, if you look it up, it's here on YouTube. Ian Gillian sitting down talking about his time in the band, because Ian went back to Deep Purple very quickly as well. It was once again just a fly-by-night venture for the third lead singer, actually fourth, because they fired Ozzy, I think, before they ever even put out Never Say Die, but they never did any work with that fella. Can't even remember his name. But you know, it's just a lot of changes for Sabbath. They had the big Stonehenge joke, you know, on Spinal Tap. If you've ever seen that movie, it's a great movie. Check it out. They have a tiny Stonehenge, and they have these dwarves that come out, and you know, they're running all over the place, and they get stuck in the pods, and their drummer's always dying and like spontaneously combusting. And not that I think it was a direct response to Sabbath, but it's just kind of funny. This album came out, I think, in 83, and Spinal Tap came out in 84. I'm pretty sure it was a direct blow to them, and I think even Tony knew, you know, like, hey, this is kind of bad, because I think it was right after that they did Seventh Star. I believe it was Seventh Star that came out with Glenn Hughes, yet another singer and member of Deep Purple. But you know, like I said, it just got a little hokey. They were on stage playing songs like you know, Deep Purple's Smoke on the Water, and it jokingly had become like, what do we play? Because we're not playing any of the DIO era Sabbath. We can't just strictly cover Ozzy stuff, and we don't have enough material to do our own, so are we going to play Evil Woman from ELO too? Anyway, you know, Sabbath went on to do, I think, personally, not so great things. I mean, they had other albums like Headless Cross, Tear, and I'm sure there was some great stuff on Seventh Star. You know, Eric Singer from Kiss, as I said, I'm a big Kiss fan, was actually on, I believe, that album with Glenn Hughes. Not the direction, personally, I really assumed Sabbath would go, because for me, the Ronnie James Dio era was a great era. It was a rebirth. And then, you know, Ian Gillian, he came in and rocked it. Personally, I think that album's great. It's different. It's not Ozzy. It's not Dio. But it's a great album. It's just kind of like Kiss the Elder. They've even said it themselves. And I think that's been the consensus in the band and the people that were in that band at the time, and people who worked on it, like Bob Ezrin, the late Bob Ezrin. But yeah, I mean, it's not like, you know, a Sabbath album, just like Elder was not like a Kiss album. It was a great album, but it's not like, you know, I don't ever think that, you know, they were ever intent on playing, you know, Digital Bitch or any of those songs, Disturb the Priest, live after Ian left. But you know, they had great years with Tony Martin and a slew of bass players and stuff like that, because I mean, hell, as we know, when Ozzy put out No Rest for the Wicked in '87, when they found the great Zakk Wylde, my favorite guitarist, also my favorite album by Ozzy, Geezer was actually in the band. Geezer toured on that album. I think Bob Daisley may have played on the album, but Geezer was in the band, you know. Of course, a lot of those bands back in the day, they would go in and out playing in different bands. You know, you basically had half a Quiet Riot in Ozzy's first lineup live, and then you know, that was forever changing too after Randy passed away. But back to our subject here, we're talking about Dio and Sabbath. So, you know, Ian's in Sabbath now. So what is Ronnie and Vinny doing? Ronnie James Dio and Vinny Appice, they actually form the band Dio. And I actually just bought this. This is really a great find. It's a release, I think, from the record company, 5 Classic Albums, as it's called. Vertigo actually put these out. It's really cool because they look exactly as though they were like vinyl sleeves, but they're compact discs, and there's 5 of them in there together. I bought them for a relatively cheap price, I think 10 to 15 bucks, which honestly is way underpriced for a new item. I mean, I got it out of the cellophane myself. It was me, not some used product, which, you know, when I was growing up, I used to trade CDs, so some of my stuff that I had when I was younger and less mature about my musical taste and what it would become, or what I thought of it, because I went through a phase where I didn't even like Kiss anymore. I was like, yeah, that was my little kid band. That's what I listened to when I was little. Let's get rid of all that junk. Ugh. I never got rid of it though. I made that good choice to never get rid of any Kiss stuff. But I have many artists that came and went. I think I had a Great White Greatest Hits. You know, I can't find it anymore. I don't know where. I don't even know if it's out of print. That's one thing I was going to say too. Is in later shows we'll discuss albums that are out of print, albums you can't find anymore. So again, this is a great find, because I mean it's got Holy Diver, the first one, with Vinny Appice, of course Ronnie James Dio's band, and the guitarist on this is really what I want to talk about. For, you know, Holy Diver, The Last in Line, Sacred Heart. Golly, these albums are really great. Dream Evil, 1987, and then Lock Up the Wolves. I believe it came out in 1990. These are great albums. Those first 3 albums, as I was talking about the guitarist, Vivian Campbell. You know, I kind of took me back in my seat there when I figured out what Vivian Campbell meant, because I go through different bands and I think about the history and keep track of these things, kind of like I keep track of meals I eat. Sometimes I can't remember what I ate last, but you go back and you think, wow, that dude's in Def Leppard now. He was in Thin Lizzy and all these other bands, but what had happened is Dio wasn't happy with the direction Sabbath was going. Him and Geezer and him and Tony were not getting along, so he decided, I'm going to form my own band. I need a guitarist. He found this guy from Ireland, Dublin, I believe. He wanted a UK-style rock guitarist, much like Tony Iommi, and he found that with Vivian Campbell. And by God, he struck the gold mine in my mind, and I think a lot of people. You know, that first album, Holy Diver, of course, has the title track on it. And then it has Rainbow in the Dark, which you wouldn't have a Dio album or a Dio song without him mentioning something about rainbows, gypsies, the devil, wolves, dreams. There's a lot of themes that are reoccurring with Ronnie James Dio. Those first 3 albums, though, dude, I'm telling you, Holy Diver, Last in Line, Sacred Heart, whew, great albums. And I figured, listening to these, some, I'll be honest, 100% full disclosure here, some of these albums I've never listened to. I had bought a Dio Greatest Hits, I believe, when I took a band trip to Chicago in 2002 or 3. And of course I was not very old, I won't mention my age at the time. I was in my teens, sophomore year of high school, I believe. Really, other than Holy Diver, didn't care for the CD, and that's why I mentioned that. You know, I used to trade things, and back in the day, I think that was one I traded. So I'm kind of reintroducing myself to Dio. You know, I went with Ozzy's Sabbath first, and then I thought I'm going to venture out and go further into the Sabbath world. And very happy to do so, because those albums are amazing. Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Live Evil, and then later Dehumanizer, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and the Heaven and Hell album. That's, again, one that I've never actually listened to, forgotten about. I know that it released a compilation of Dio era greatest hits and live stuff. I think it was in 07, near the time of his death. You know, he died, I think, 3 years later in 2010. and there were 3 new songs on that. So eventually, I'll probably buy that too. But I have the Heaven and Hell CD coming in the mail. So can't honestly say that I won't venture back into this if I feel the need to do so. But really just wanted to get on here and talk about some things that interest me with these bands. Would like some feedback. You know, I listened to all 5 of these albums and bought some others, some Sabbath albums. Like I said, you know, bought Born Again with Ian Gillian. But I also bought Dehumanizer. And this is a great, you know, recopy. This actually came out last year. It's really great. It's double disc, got a lot of stuff. The booklet has a lot of info in it, and it's got some, you know, some single edits and B-side versions of different songs, live era stuff that they did in '92. So, whereas I've got the Live Evil that has, you know, both the same lineup with Ronnie, Tony, Geezer, and Vinny. This is much more mature era stuff because this is '92. This is a decade after they even formed. So it sounds a little different, production's a little different, recording's a little different. Heads are cooler. They're not really trying to start, you know, they started over because they realized they're in a place that they can do that. But this is a great album. It came out around the time that Wayne's World came out. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, another geek rocker old guy movie of the era, Wayne's World. But check that out too. Everybody knows, you know, Queen made the hit. Bohemian Rhapsody kind of had a resurgence when that movie came out. Well, Sabbath also contributed to that. I think Aerosmith contributed to the second one. So things like that keep rock alive for me and for us fans out there, you know, huge rock fans. But I still have a lot more, personally, I have a lot more introspect to go into here as far as Ozzy's Sabbath even, DIO Sabbath, and Heaven and Hell. The album that's supposed to be in the mail, I think they put it out in '07, '08. It should be here shortly. Also, I reordered my Mob Rules because I haven't had that in a long time either. So, yeah, love Ozzy, but I love Dio with a similar compassion. I think that, you know, he was worthy of the throne. Ozzy stepped down, and he was kicked out. It's like Van Halen. You never really know who's in Van Halen because somebody always says they got fired or they got kicked out or, you know, they left to do this or do that because everybody knows David Lee Roth was crazy from the East, and that's why he left. Not really. But anyway, you know, I love these bands. Love Van Halen, love Kiss, love Sabbath, love all the originals. Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Deep Purple, Motley Crue, Skid Row. All the, you know, to me, those are the big bands like Metallica and Guns N' Roses. So, you know, we'll talk on other shows. This may be boring to you. I don't know if anybody will subscribe, but if you're interested, subscribe below and find out what's next. I have some ideas I've been throwing around about Kiss, about grunge era albums, about hair bands. I'm going to do some compare and contrast and talk about, you know, just different things. I'm a drummer myself, a musician, so one of my ideas was to talk about underrated drummers. And I'm not just talking about the Vinny Appices of the world. I'm talking about people like Josh Freese and stuff like that. You know, even Bill Ward can be considered an underrated drummer to some degree, just because I think during that era, John Bonham stole the limelight from everybody. You know, found out some disheartening information about Peter Criss the other day on some original Kiss era albums. You know, 4 original era Kiss albums. So we may end up getting into that. But as far as Dio and Sabbath are concerned, had a great time talking to you. My name is Hugh Scheffner. Please subscribe below and keep rocking. quick couple things. I wanted to give a shout out to my kiddos, Melody and John, who helped me with the editing process of this first video. This is a new venture for me. I can understand it if you don't like it or you're bored to tears. Otherwise, I really don't care. This is just something I wanted to do. Look forward to getting that Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules in the mail. Probably we'll do a little review on that, and we'll talk again about the fallout after Dehumanizer and Ozzy's retirement and the time that Rob Halford sang for Black Sabbath. See you here.